This video is going to be explaining operating with radicals. We're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing radicals because those are the operations. We are going to be using our calculator if it has numbers in it. We are going to be using our exponent rules if we have variables. So our first part, we're going to add radicals. We're going to use our calculator to give answers in decimal form. We're going to round to the nearest hundredth and simplify the variables. What that means is if it's just numbers, we're going to get just a value. So if we look at example A, we have the square root of 28 plus 4 square root of 63. These are just numbers. That means we're just going to use our calculator. We're just going to use our calculator. So we're going to take our calculator. We're going to type in the square root of 28. We have to make sure we get out of that first radical plus 4 square root of 63. And again, we're going to make sure we get out of that radical. Now, if you have a slightly older calculator and you do it, you're going to have the square root of 28. And to get out of that radical, you have to close that parentheses, then plus 4 square root of 63. And again, you're going to have to close that parentheses to get out of that radical. And then you'll press enter. You'll press enter on the newer one too. So then you'll have the same decimal value of 37 and 4 hundredths. 37 and 4 hundredths. We're going to round to the nearest hundredth. So this is approximately 37 and 4 hundredths. On example B, because we have numbers and letters, we actually cannot combine the two things in our calculator. So instead of combining them, we're going to do them separately. Okay? We have to make sure we do specifically this one first, and then we'll do the second one. We're going to keep that plus sign in the middle. So our answer is going to have a plus sign in the middle. And what we'll do is we'll take the square root of 12. The square root of 12. We get 3 and 46 hundredths. So this first part, we're going to have 3 and 46 hundredths, so it's approximately 3 and 46 hundredths. Then we will simplify the variables. The square root of x to the fourth, so it's 2 goes into 4 2 times, so it's x squared with no remainder. And then the square root of y squared. So 2 goes into 2 one time with no remainder, so we have y to the first as our coefficient. Plus, then we have the square root of 27. So we take the square root of 27, and we get 3, and this 6 becomes that 9 goes up. So 19 will round to a 20. So it's 5 and 20 hundredths, or 5 and 2 tenths. Now, if you notice, this first expression has variables with it, and the second one does not. These are not like terms, so we cannot combine them any further. This is our final answer, because these have letters in them as well. So if they are all just numbers, you can put it straight in your calculator as you see it. But if it doesn't, if it has letters in it, you have to do each individual one with addition and subtraction, because you have to add and subtract like terms. So on this next example, we have 4 squared of 11 plus 5 squared of 11. These are all numbers, so we can't put them in our calculator. I will note that because they have the same radicand, you actually can simplify this without using a calculator. This could become, because they have the same radicand, it's very similar to variables. These are the same base, the square root of 11, the square root of 11. So we would keep the square root of 11, and we would add the coefficients. Since they have the same radicand, keep the radicand. You add the coefficients. 4 plus 5 is 9. That is one way of looking at that. However, you can still just put it straight in your calculator. So we have 4 square root of 11. Make sure you get out of that radical, plus 5 square root of 11. Get out of that radical. Press enter. So I get 29 and 85 hundredths. And if I had done 9 square root of 11, I actually get the same value. That tells me that that was actually simplified like it should have been. So the answer is 29 and 85 hundredths. So approximately 29 and 85 hundredths. On part D, you have just numbers, so we can't put them in our calculator. Now, because these are not the same radicands right now, you can't just add your coefficients, but you actually could simplify the square root of 75, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to go straight into my calculator. This would go on your calculator, and so could letter C. This is straight in your calculator, because it's just numbers. So we take the square root of 3, get out of the radical, plus the square root of 75, get out of your radical, enter. So it's 10 and 39 hundredths. So approximately 10 and 39 hundredths. Because it's straight in your calculator. Now example E, however, has a variable in it, so we have to be very careful about this. We have to do this part first, plus this second part. So because it's addition, we will still have a plus sign in our answer. So the numbers we want to actually use first. So the 7, then square root 5. 7, then square root 5 gives us 15 and 65 hundredths. 15, so approximately 15 and 65 hundredths. But then we have the square root of x still. Now that square root did not go away because we took the square root of 5. That square root of x is still on there. So the square root of x, 2 cannot go into 1. The index is too big. So that means we're going to be left with the square root of x. If you're unsure about what I'm talking about for here, I have another video posted on how to simplify radical expressions. So we would leave it at the square root of x. Plus, then we have to do 3 square root 20. So we do 3 square root 20, get out of the radical, press enter. So we have 13 and 42 hundredths. 13 and 42 hundredths. Now because this has a variable in it, and this one doesn't have the same variable, the exact same, that means that we cannot combine these any further, and that is our final answer. That's adding radicals. So adding radicals, you got to be careful. If they have the same variables, the exact same variables, you can add the coefficients. The next one is subtracting radicals. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to use our calculator to give an answer in decimal form. We're going to round to the nearest hundredth, and we're going to simplify the variables if possible. So part A has only numbers. That means we can use just straight into our calculator. And again, so I'll use the older calculator this time. So on the older calculator, I have to do the square root of 28. Square root of 28, but I have to close my parentheses to stop that radical, minus 4 square root of 63, and then close my parentheses to stop that radical. Enter. And I got negative 26 and 46 hundredths. So this is approximately negative 26 and 46 hundredths. On example B, these are also just numbers. That means I can put it straight into my calculator. So when I do this, I have to, again, I'm using the older calculator so you can see the differences. The square root of 12, then I have to close my parentheses to get out of it, minus the square root of 27 and close my parentheses to stop the radical. Enter. We get negative 1 and 73 hundredths. So approximately negative 1 and 73 hundredths, and that's our answer. On the next one, again, you have 4 square root of 11 minus 5 square root of 11. Now, as I said earlier up here, since they have the same exact radicand, you can actually do something with the coefficients. We can do the same thing. Since these have the exact same radicands, we can actually do 4 minus 5 for the coefficients. And this is actually technically negative 1 square root of 11. But we can still just straight use our calculator and type in 4 square root of 11. So 4 square root of 11, close the parentheses for the radical, minus 5 square root of 11, close parentheses. And I get negative 3 and 32 hundredths. If I did negative 1 square root of 11, I get the same decimal, because that was what I had gotten because of the knowing how to do the coefficients. So negative 3 and 32 hundredths. So approximately negative 3 and 32 hundredths. On part D, again, only numbers, so I can straight calculator. And if you look at E, also just numbers, so calculator. So these are calculator. So the square root of 3, close parentheses, minus the square root of 75, close parentheses. I get negative 6 and 93 hundredths. So approximately negative 6 and 93 hundredths. And then example E, also just numbers. This is very similar to E up here, but these have letters in it. So you always gotta check, see if you have letters. So we have 7 square root of 5, close the parentheses, minus 3 square root of 20, close parentheses. And again, the parentheses only happen to be used on the older type of calculator. So if your square root symbol opens up a parentheses when it comes up, that's when you have to close it. If your calculator doesn't open up parentheses, you just have to press the over key to make sure that it will actually get out of the radical. So this is for the older types of calculators. So I'll press enter, and we get 2 and 24 hundredths. So approximately 2 and 24 hundredths. And these are adding and subtracting radicals. So I'm going to stop this video, and I will continue into another video on how to multiply and divide, because they take different types of processes. So when you add and subtract, you have to have like terms, so the exact same radicand to be able to add the coefficients. And if we simplify, they have to have the exact same variables to be able to add the decimals. These two did not have the exact same variables, so we had to keep them separated. And that's adding and subtracting radicals.